So here's our hen Hazel here, and the first thing we want to notice is Hazel was one of those very curious, very alert hens. It's all right there, Hazel. So one of the first things we usually like to do for our exam is it's good to have a system, and a lot of times what I like to do is just take a look at the very first thing, and the very first thing is the hen having any troubles breathing? Are there any noises that shouldn't be there? Hens are pretty silent when they breathe. And do you notice that they're breathing excessively fast? And when they're breathing really fast, there's two clues as to whether that's a problem or not. One is the bobbing of the head. Well, doggone it, hens bob their heads anyway, so that makes it a little hard to tell. But a telltale sign will be the bobbing of the tail. A lot of hens and birds in general that are having difficulty breathing, you'll notice them bobbing their tails up and down. So that's one thing to look for. Fortunately, that's not going on with Hazel right now. The other thing is that we want to make sure that we do just a quick look on their head for symmetry. Do the eyes and the comb and everything and the shape of the head look symmetrical? And from my point of view, here it is. I don't know if I can turn Hazel's head around. She's doesn't want to, and this resistance is actually a good thing. If you can, it's a good idea to be able to take a look inside their little mouths, and that looks good. It should look kind of dry like that. They don't have a wet, slobbery mouth like a dog or some people do. And then the next thing we want to do is just to look at their little wings, and their wings actually do come out and open up nicely like this. We just want to make sure there's no missing feathers, and that also that there's no abnormal resistance when we're moving these wings around. Sometimes they do get injured. The next thing we want to do is to feel for their little keel bone, or where their breast is, right down here. And the birds have a very interesting setup here. They have a big breast muscle because these operate a little pulley system that goes over their shoulders that helps them fly, helps them move their wings around, and for some birds for long periods of time. And they don't need to be super fleshy down here on the breast muscle, since most hens don't fly. You just want to make sure that it's not indented. What I mean by that is when you feel the breast muscle, it should be two little convex surfaces. If you feel that it kind of goes in, if it's concave, then that's a concern. The next thing is that I like to pay a lot of attention to is the feet. What do the feet look like? And honestly, what I really am looking at is what the bottoms of the feet look like. One of the big concerns with hens and a lot of fowl is a condition known as bumblefoot, and technically the term for bumblefoot is ulcerative plantar fasciitis, where they end up developing wounds on their feet that can quickly become very, very serious, very infected, and can oftentimes lead to the demise of the bird. The sooner we get on top of those things, the better. What we should see on the bottom of a bird's foot is we should see a lot of, in the business we call it architecture. You should see a lot of these little ridges and bumps, and it looks almost like scaly material here. That's very normal. What does the beginning of bumblefoot look like? In the very beginning, it's just where some of that stuff begins to really flatten out, and you don't see those things anymore. That's the first sign. And then comes redness, and then after redness, swelling, and then after swelling and redness, ulceration and erosion. And we don't want to get to those other areas. So by the time it's red, it's definitely a time to go see the vet. But if you start noticing that their feet start to look different, when some of these features begin to go away, that's the first telltale sign. And that's something that we usually tell people in the exam room. But if you check these things on your own, that would serve well for your hens. The next thing to do is to just reach your hand underneath here and feel where that breastbone is. And what you're going to do is just slowly walk, just like when you're walking your fingers on your arm like this. I'm just going to walk them off of the breastbone onto this next area. Now, the thing is that birds have ribs too, and off to the side you'll feel some ribs that stick out. What you want to do is to get underneath those ribs and just very gently, not with the tips of your fingers, but with the flats of your hand, as much as will fit in there, is just kind of feel around and see if there's any distension of the abdomen. And you can go all the way back to the vent and do that. What it normally should feel like is it should give a little. If you feel any big hard lumps, then that's a concern. Now, what I would suggest doing to get to know what this feels like is just check your hens. Most of the time they're going to be normal. Just get an idea of what their little tummies feel like. The next thing is the end where the chicken feed comes out of. So we want to take a look underneath here, and sometimes they will have a little bit of a dirty bottom, but for the most part they shouldn't. And what they have here is birds, all birds have a common opening where they go potty from. This is technically known as the cloaca, but most of us everywhere call it the vent. And if you kind of think about it, where they urinate from and where they defecate from, you know, they do have two separate areas where that occurs from, but it comes together in one common chamber, and it's that common chamber that exits at the cloaca. So what we want to look for, you know, does it look red? Well, Hazel's looks very normal and pink on the inside. And, you know, is it dirty or swollen? Well, no, it's not. And is it very symmetrical? Yes, it is. So this is a very healthy backside of a hen.
Good girl.
The next thing we want to check for becomes a little harder. What we want to do is just take a look under the feathers. Now, most hens don't like it if you peel their feathers back, so what you can do is go in between, and once you spread the feathers apart, you'll notice there's just a bunch of downy stuff in there. And then you can start exploring, and what we're looking for is, do we see any redness, irritation? Do we see any organisms or bugs? Now, a lot of the external parasites of hens live on the underside. So one of the neat tricks that you can do to see whether they have some of these, because not all hens are going to want you to turn them over and look around and everything, is you can take either just plain old water, or sometimes what we'll do is we'll take a little bit of alcohol, just like on a cotton ball, and just go underneath their little leg here and just moisten up some of the areas right there between the tummy and the leg, and just get some of those feathers wet. And then just leave your hen there on a white towel. A lot of times what will happen with these parasites is they won't like that, and they'll fall down. And the most common mite that affects these hens will definitely do that. Now, can you flip them over and look and find these little organisms there? You certainly can. It's just sometimes they won't want you to. And this little trick with rubbing alcohol, now we're not asking you to douse your hen with rubbing alcohol. It's just a little bit on a cotton ball. Oh, what a good girl. And what we're going to do is just kind of take a look in here. You can do that same thing here where you're going to, when you move the feathers apart, you're going to move them side to side. And after you go side to side, you can see where there's some skin, and then you can start moving along. And these little organisms, sometimes they'll be stuck to the hair shaft, but usually they're right there on the skin. And this looks like nice, normal chicken skin. Sometimes it's pigmented like this, so it'll have kind of a grayish white to grayish black color. And sometimes it'll be pink like this. The last thing I wanted to mention is birds that get injured. Sometimes they'll get into little fights, and they'll get a cut or a laceration. Now, anytime they develop a laceration, if you're concerned, call your local veterinarian. They can help you out. But a couple things I wanted to mention is the first thing with any laceration or any wound on any animal is to keep your fingers out of it. Don't get your fingers within about 1 inch or 2 inches of it, because some of the worst things we can do is to put the bacteria that are on our hands, which are virtually impossible or at least very difficult to kill, and then put them into a wound on an animal. The next thing is to wear gloves if you're going to look at it. And the other thing I wanted to mention to you is that little trick about parting the feathers sideways first and then exploring will give you a better way to look for any wounds on your bird. Now, a very interesting thing about birds is that for those of you that did well in biology in high school will know about a substance known as bilirubin. And bilirubin is a metabolite of normal red blood cell recycling and metabolism. Birds don't make bilirubin. They make the form that's right before it called biliverdin. And the interesting thing about biliverdin is that it's green. And if you kind of break down the word, you can see biliverdin, it kind of makes sense. And whenever they get a wound, their bruising and everything is going to look greenish. That does not mean that the wound is becoming gangrenous, like someone might think. You know, like when something turns green, you go, oh, it's getting rotten. Don't panic, but that's probably a time to call your local veterinarian, or at least those that want to see birds. I hope that this little session today has been helpful in terms of what to look for in terms of the health for your flock of hens, and also when to attach, or to, excuse me, I didn't mean attach, when to contact your veterinarian as far as concerns for your hens. The last thing is, should you bring your hens in for routine exams? You certainly can for those that you're concerned about. Otherwise, you can always have your local vet come out and at least inspect your flock to make sure that, you know, are there any things that they recommend that you change in terms of feeding or shelter. This is actually a very idyllic and perfect setting here at this little farm. And if you have any other questions, contact us on our app or our website, or make an appointment should you have any concerns. I thank you very much for your attention. Bye-bye.